Welcome back to my channel, and wait, what? No, okay, it's fine. You know what, it's a professional would redo that opening, but a professional, I am not. Today we're gonna be talking about all the books that I read in July. July was a surprisingly lighter reading month for me. In June, I read a ton of books. And I think to a degree, I burnt myself out a little bit. So this month, I read fewer books. I also had a lot going on this month. So the first week of the month, for 5 whole days, I was at a board gaming convention. I have another one coming up this week. It's just that time of year, I guess. And so for that 5 days, I didn't really read anything. And I don't know, I was in such a good groove of reading, and then that like threw off everything. So it's been a great month. I've started watching One Piece, the anime, which has been really fun. I'm going to talk about some manga, actually. I have played a ton of board games. It's been a really just nice month and kind of helped me like come down off of the craziness of June. But I didn't read as much. But that's okay, because we still have lots to talk about, and we will talk about them. And, make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy my YouTube videos, which apparently are just a hot mess disaster. I wouldn't expect anything less, right? So let's jump in and see what I read in July. Let's see what I read. Let's see what I read in July. Oh boy. Yeah, I feel like we should start here. It's gonna be the most ridiculous video. So this is Lord of Leaves by Nazri Noor. This is the second book in the Wild Hearts series. As you can probably guess, these are gay, and they are a little spicy, and I really quite like them. I think I'm going to read the whole series, and then he has other books that are set in the same world, but with different characters. I don't know, they're just light and fun, and they're a little spicy. All the characters are very snarky and sarcastic with each other. I like this. I like the world building, surprisingly, a lot. It's a fantasy world, but it's just like full of... It's just like a really fun fantasy world, and there's like some Avatar The Last Airbender elements, there's some Pokemon elements, there's just like a lot of things that I really like kind of tied up into one adult book series. Yeah, these are quite fun. I'm not usually like a spicy romance reader, but spicy romantasy reader, but this kind of checks all the boxes, and it's spicy, but not so spicy that I'm like, have to look away because I'm blushing, right? Like, it is spicy, but it's contained. It's contained spice. What does that even mean? Spice in a jar. Nope, that didn't make it better. But yeah, I really like this series. I think it's a lot of fun. This is only the second book I've read of Nazri Noor's, but very light, digestible, easy, fun reading. If that's what you're looking for, and you think this man is attractive, I would give this a try, because it's pretty darn good, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah, that's Lord of Leaves, like I said, second book in the Wild Heart series. If you look up Nazri Noor, tons of books. I think they're all set in the same world, which is really cool. So yeah. For Easy Cat's Book Club this month, we read To Shape a Dragon's Breath. Now, this comes on the heels of last month when I read, what was the name of that book that I didn't like? You guys know, the dragon book. I've erased it from my mind because I was just like, no, I don't want to think about, Fourth Wing. That was the name of the book. I really didn't like Fourth Wing, so I had announced that this was going to be our book club pick, and I was a little concerned because it's another book about dragons, and I was like, ooh. I mean, I love dragons. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of the dragons, but this, I was just a little worried. So this book deals with an indigenous character who basically finds a dragon egg. The dragon gets birth, and this character has to go to like the colonized land where they, have kind of like set up all these rules, and they have their like dragon school, and like she's forced to go there and like learn from them. And it really deals with like the differences and the strains between the two cultures, and it's very much the book is, it deals with dragons, and it has some really cool world building. Like, the world building in this book is it's almost like too much, and what I mean by that is, like, I love it. Listen, I love world building, and so I'm never gonna say no to more, but the book is so often building the world that sometimes I think the plot gets a little bit lost in the world building. And I want to be clear, I'm fine with that. I liked it. I'm like, tell me more details about the science system in this world. Tell me everything. But I do think some people will find that this book is maybe a little bit lighter on the plot side of things and a little bit heavier on the world building side of things. The book is very much a commentary on, you know, the relationship between indigenous peoples and the people who have colonized their lands. And it really goes in on a lot of that in really, really interesting, really powerful ways. And I really appreciated the book for that. Something I will say going in, and it's something I've seen people kind of complain about in reviews, is that the book is written with a very like indigenous background. And what I mean by that is that sometimes the story might feel like it makes some kind of weird jumps, and oftentimes they'll stop in the middle of everything to like tell a story, like an olden time folktale or a story that maybe relates to what's going on. Again, I loved all of these things. I was like, I thought it was great. It's so different. It has so much in common with things that I've read before that I liked, but then it was also so different at the same time. And I really liked that. It was just a nice breath of fresh air. And like I said, it does deal with some very intense topics. It very heavily deals with racism, colonization, all of that stuff, but in just such interesting, smart ways. There's just so much about this book that I liked. I will say, like I said, this beginning of a series, I do think if I have one complaint, it's that it is pretty light on actual plot. It spends a lot of time just building out the world, building out the rules of the world, building out the rules of the science system of the world, the politics of the world. And if you love world building, like if you're someone who's like, let me sit down with the Silmarillion and just enjoy myself, I think you'll really like this. It's not as complicated as the Silmarillion, I promise. But I think if you're looking for like a fast-paced, action-heavy fantasy book, you're not going to find that here. You're going to find more of that like really tedious, but rewarding world building in this book. And I really liked it a lot. I don't know that everybody's going to like it the same way. I think this is going to be for there are going to be people that adore this book and just think it's like so cool. And I think there are going to be people that are like, it wasn't for me. And I think that's fine, but it's a very unique book, and if anything I just said sounds good to you, I would definitely give it a try, because it's a really good book, and I liked it a lot. All right, next up, I am continuing to read through the Chronicles of Narnia. If you've been following along, I've been reading through the Chronicles of Narnia for the very first time. This is The Horse and His Boy. After this book, I only have 2 books left, which is very exciting, because if you have been following along, you know that I've been liking these books less and less and less as we go along, and Horse and His Boy is no exception. I will say I like the main character Shasta and his relationship with Bree the horse, and I really enjoyed those 2 characters. In fact, there's quite a few characters in the book that I liked, and I think overall the story could have been really, really interesting. I think the story does some things that are different than the other Narnia books. I really liked that we kind of got to see a little bit more of some of the characters that we didn't see as much from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, kind of the middle of their story a little bit. But more than anything, I like that this shakes things up. This isn't a story about a random kid that falls through a window or a painting or a cupboard and ends up in this world. It's about a character who lives in this world and is dealing with this world and living in this world. And I like all of that. I think, my issues come in with, once again, I just am not, C.S. Lewis and his writing and me will just never get along. I just don't really like how he writes books. I also just continue to really not like Aslan. I feel like Aslan is a character that is supposed to very much represent like Jesus and God and this Holy Spirit, but I just find him to be quite cruel. I feel like the way he teaches lessons is very manipulative. I feel like it's mean. I feel like there are better ways. I feel like he almost, this is going to sound really harsh, but I feel like he almost tortures the people he's trying to teach lessons to until he finally teaches them the lesson, until he finally steps in. And I don't think all of his methods necessarily add up to a better taught lesson. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like he does these things and then when people learn, it's like, oh, well, it was all in favor of them learning. I feel like they would have gotten the same value from the lesson if he had just taught them the lesson and not made their lives awful in teaching it. And that drives me crazy. I really strongly dislike Aslan. I've disliked him since the first book. I just think he is just such an awful character, and I know what he represents, and it honestly makes me more upset. When I think about it, when I think about the deeper implications of everything I just said about Aslan, it makes me even angrier. Getting worked up about this book. The other thing about this book that I will say is it has not aged well. I really dislike the way that the book portrays like white people versus brown people, and white people are just, you know, so civilized and perfect and wonderful, and the brown people are just uncivilized and wild and monstrous and evil, and it reads in 2023. Listen, I realize this book was not written in 2023, all right? I know. And I get that. And I also would imagine that C.S. Lewis's portrayal of these characters was probably very affected by the time and his experiences, sure. But reading this in 2023, there were so many times where I was like, this book is, I mean, I even like posted it, I think on Threads. I was like, is it just me, or is this book like really racist? And it seeps through the pages. The feeling that these white characters are so much better than these brown characters. And I think it's especially upsetting because the stories that all of these books are based on are about brown characters, initially. You know what I mean? And so to then paint them as the villains is just, it was really upsetting. And I want to be clear, I really did like Shasta and Bree. I like their story. And I think this book could have been my favorite. It could have been my favorite because I think their story was so unique and so much more interesting to me than some of the other stories that we've seen. But man, there's just some glaring problems with this book that you just can't ignore because they're so prominent to the story. I have 2 books left. I'm excited to read The Magician's Nephew because I know it's the prequel, like it's supposed to be kind of like the creation of this world. I am excited to read that. I've heard from everything I've posted about these reviews, everybody has told me I am not going to like the final battle, the last battle, the battle of the battles, battle of the bands, the last battle. I don't think it's called Battle of the Bands. I don't think I'm going to like that book very much. A lot of people have said that I'm not going to like it, but I'm still going to read it because we're here for the experience. We're here for the content, all right? But yeah, The Horse and His Boy was not a win for me. But weirdly, even though I've read 5 of these books so far, and I've only really enjoyed like 1.5 of them. No, I take that back. 2.5 of them. I really liked Voyage of the Dawn Treader quite a bit. And I did like Prince Caspian quite a bit. And I thought Lion the Witch of the Wardrobe was okay. All right. So even with that knowledge, I am quite excited for The Magician's Nephew. I don't know why. I have a good feeling about it. I'll probably be proven wrong, but I have a good feeling about it. So that's The Horse and His Boy. This is the most unhinged YouTube video I've ever made in my entire life. Let's talk about Ava Evergreen, SemiMagical Witch. Now, this is a middle grade novel. This is very much like, okay, listen. We're gonna go a little deep in the references here. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. If Kiki's Delivery Service, the movie, had a child with the Atelier video game series, one of my favorite video game series about little alchemists making things and going out in the woods and fighting monsters and getting ingredients and making things. If those 2 properties had a baby, it would be this book. And I say that with all the love in the world because I really liked this a lot. It's about a young witch. She doesn't have a whole lot of magic, but she wants to be a witch. But then they're like, well, you do not have enough magic. We're not going to make you a witch. We're going to take away all your magic, and you're just going to have to live that way. And she's like, no, give me a chance. So they send her on her way. She ends up in this village that is just kind of a hot mess. And she starts trying to, like, make things better, but she's, like, not a very good witch. So oftentimes it feels like she's making things worse or not making things better fast enough. And the book really deals with like, what a lot of middle grade books deal with, right? Which is that the things that make you unique or different are what make you special. You might not be the best at something, but it's all about the effort and the heart you put into it that make it what it is. You might not have the most magic, but if you have the most care and compassion for the people that you're trying to help and make their lives better, that means something. That has more, in many ways, that has more value than how strong of a witch you are. I just thought this was great. This is another one of those middle grade books that I think anybody could pick this up, all right? If you are hesitant about picking up a middle grade book, here's what I want you to do. When you pick this book up, I just want you to tell yourself it's a cozy fantasy, all right? It's a cozy fantasy book for any age, and read it and enjoy, because it is... I read a lot of cozy fantasy, and I thought this was one of the better ones that I've read. It was just really delightful. I'm excited to read the sequel. I want to read more from Julie Abe. I think that's how you say it. I want to read more from this author. I liked the writing that much that I'm going to try and read several more of their books. But this was great. Such a delight. And like I said, pretend if you don't know Atelier, the video game series, because it's more niche. It's a little niche. But Kiki's Delivery Service, you probably are familiar with that. Even if you only like that, I think you should check this out, because it definitely has those vibes. Definitely has like Miyazaki vibes. And I really liked it a lot. Highly, highly, highly recommend. This is one of the best things that I read this month. So yeah. We have 2 books left, and then I want to talk to you about some of the manga that I've been reading this month. So next up is Interesting Times. This is the next book in my Discworld series. I just posted a video about this on TikTok today, so you may have seen that. So I'm going to reiterate some of the things that I said there. This book was, I felt very divided on this book, all right? There were times where I was like, I love this, and then there were times where I was like, I hate this. So let's be very clear. I think the things in Interesting Times, there's so many good ideas, right? Like the book is dealing with some ideas that feel very timely and very poignant, and then sometimes it will do things that make it feel very dated. In fact, I would say of all the Discworld books I've read so far, this is the one that feels the most outdated. And we'll get to what I mean by that in a second. So let's talk about the good things. The book deals heavily with the idea of like written words and stories and how those can become belief and how belief can become faith and the power of that. Loved all of that. Thought that was so well done. The book also deals with AI, which is such an important conversation of our time. And yet this was written in 1994. Who knew? But it talks about that, which I thought was really fun. There's so many good characters. I loved seeing Two Flower come back. Two Flower was one of my favorite characters in the very first books, and it was great to see him come back. I literally gasped when he came back. I was like, oh, Two Flower! And Cohen the Barbarian and his Silver Horde, basically he has a group of like very, very, very old men barbarians. They can like barely hear. They don't know how to be civilized. I loved them with my whole heart. They were so lovely. This book is one of the Rincewind books. So all the Discworld books are kind of divided. Well, most of them are divided up into kind of like mini series and they focus on specific characters. This is part of the series that focuses on Rincewind. Now, Rincewind is one of my least favorite characters in the Discworld. He just kind of drives me crazy. He drove me less crazy in this book than he has in some others, so that was a good thing. He was a little bit less obnoxious in this book than otherwise. And of course, with Rincewind, we get the luggage, which is a fantastic character, and some of the things they do with the luggage in this book are delightful. Now, where I think the book stumbles is that Rincewind in this book gets sent by the wizards to the counterweight continent on the Discworld, which is essentially based off of like China and Asian cultures. And here's the thing, with this being written in 1994, I think, Terry Pratchett is a master. He's a masterful author, and he's a master of satire and just smart comedy. And I think oftentimes he's walking a very fine line here. And oftentimes I think he does a really great job of satirizing, the differences between Eastern and Western cultures, right? He's not just sitting here making fun of Asian cultures. He's making fun of the differences between the two, and making kind of light of the things that are different between the two that, one culture might like about the other and the other culture might like about the other, and the things that their differences and something that this culture finds silly, this culture might love, and vice versa. He often does that very well. But unfortunately, because this book came out in 1994 and we weren't having many of the conversations we're having today, and especially not in such open online spaces, sometimes the jokes play right into like very, very tired, racially problematic stereotypes. And do I think Terry Pratchett meant to do that? Of course not. I think at the time that this came out, it was probably incredibly progressive. But in 2023, reading jokes about Asians eating dogs is just, it's not funny and it's not amusing, and it feels exhausted. Like it's like, oh, like eye roll, like, oh, really? And there are many jokes like that just have that very like old, tired, like, oh my God, really? We're making this joke? Ugh, like, and it's sad because it means that this book just has not aged very well. It's a book that of all the Discworlds, it would be one that would be hard for me to recommend, because I feel like I'd have to recommend it with kind of a forewarning, or recommend it with a little bit of but just so you know, there are some things you should know before you. I mean, this is good, but you should know before you read it. And I hate that. And like I said, it's a very fine line. I think sometimes the way that he talks about Asian culture versus, or Eastern, even better, the way he talks about Eastern versus Western culture, sometimes it works really well, but sometimes it really doesn't work very well. And you feel it. Like it's like my whole body cringed at some of the points because we were doing so good. And I was like, yeah, this is really smart. This is a really intelligent way to talk about these things. And then like there would be one joke where I'd just be like, ooh. It's like the kind of joke that some of the jokes are like the kind of jokes that your uncle would say at like Thanksgiving dinner, and then everybody would like awkwardly laugh because they don't know what else to do. Like they're like, oh, it's funny, please stop talking. That's how some parts of this book made me feel, which isn't great. So very mixed feelings. We've yet to find a Rincewind book that I loved, unfortunately, but maybe someday we'll get there. But overall, I'm still really enjoying Discworld. Like I said, I think Terry Pratchett is an absolute brilliant mastermind of fantasy and satire and comedy. And even though I didn't love this book, I still have a lot of faith in him as an author. And I'm excited to keep going on this journey because I just have absolutely loved reading these Discworld books, and it's been so much fun. I just didn't love this one very much. And you know what? That's okay. All right, last book that I read this month was 1,500 Miles from the Sun. Now, Jonny Garza wrote a book called Onder and Santi Were Here, which if you've seen any of my videos, you've heard me rant and rave about because I absolutely adore it. And this was actually their first book, and Onder and Santi was their second book. And so I decided to go back and read this. Now, I'm going to be very transparent. I have owned this book for quite some time, and I did not read it sooner because I don't really like the cover. I don't think it's a very good cover. And honestly, I don't think it does a very good job of representing the book. I'm so glad that Jonny Garza's covers are getting better because Onder and Santi Here is obviously stunning. Listen. I don't hate the cover, but the cover is not calling my name. It's not saying you need to read this book right now. And I do think cover art's incredibly important in the way that it conveys the message of the book. And I don't think this conveys the message of the book very well. That being said, this is a young, queer, coming-of-age novel about a character who is in the closet, and then, something happens, and he comes out as gay to his friends. His father doesn't know. His father's very homophobic. This book deals much more with homophobia than Onder and Santi Were Here. So Onder and Santi Were Here is dealing a lot more with, like, racism and the immigration system in the United States, but also it's just a beautiful love story. This is not dealing with immigration. This is dealing with, like, very aggressive family homophobia. And I say that to explain the story, but also to warn you, if that's something you're experiencing and don't really want to read about it right now, I would probably avoid this one. But it was an excellent book. And more than what it deals with homophobia, but it also deals with long-distance relationships and very young long-distance relationships. So the main character basically meets someone online, and they form a relationship over 1,500 miles. See how it's all coming together. And it was very cute. And listen, I really don't love insta-love. Like, it's not a trope that I love. But Jonny Garza might be the only person who can give me insta-love. And I'm like, yes, completely real, completely realistic. I really like the way they write insta-love. And here's the thing. I think insta-love absolutely exists, right? Like, it's definitely something. My husband, I forgot what he's called. I'm like, that man that lives in my house. I think when he and I first started dating, we were like very instantly attracted to each other, right? And it was like, we wanted to spend all our time together. So it exists. It's just that oftentimes when it's written in books, I find it annoying. And I find it I don't feel like it's earned. But I feel like Jonny Garza, when they write characters that like instantly are attracted to each other, I feel like it's earned. I feel like they really give me reasons to understand why that is happening to these characters. And I loved the two main characters in this book. I think the way that it talks about long distance relationships and making that work, and the risk that you put yourself through to make that work, and the chance you take on another person, while at the same time also dealing with growing up and coming out and homophobia, and this idea of who the family you choose, the path you choose, being your best self for yourself and not for your family who no matter how good you are, they're not going to care because they have this deep-rooted hatred in their mind. So many good ideas in this book. Now, if I had to pick, I do think Under and Santi is the better book, but that makes sense. It's their second book. But this is a really strong debut, and if you liked Under and Santi were here, if you liked Under and Santi were here, or if you loved it like I did, I absolutely think you should pick this up. It was really great, and very similar writing. I think the audiobook was even narrated by the same author as Under and Santi were here, which was a little confusing to me at first, because I was like, Under, why are you saying things like this about another boy? What about Santi? And then I realized it was a different character. It's fine. I really like this a lot. So 1,500 Miles from the Sun. I'm just going to briefly talk about manga. We're not going to do long, crazy reviews about any of these, but I've been reading Beastars. I've been trying to complete it. This is book 12, but I'm actually just finished, I think, book 17 the other night. Been trying to complete Beastars because it's only 22 volumes. I hate how much I love this series. I always feel weird when I'm reading it. I don't ever really want to talk about it with friends. If they're like, what manga do you recommend? I'm like, definitely not Beastars. I don't know why. This book feels like a guilty pleasure. I really love it, though. I think it's such an interesting story. It's such an interesting world. I really love the main characters. When I think about this book, I think about kind of like 3 main characters, and I really adore them. And every volume introduces some new element to this world that I'm like, that is wild. How did they come up with that? I really like this series a lot. It is so bizarre and so weird, and I really love it, and I'm excited to see how it ends. So I think by the end of August I will have finished the series, and then I'll be able to talk about kind of my final thoughts about it. So Beastars. I also started reading, because I picked up the box set for like a year ago and then never got around to it, so I started reading Bakuman. This is a really cool slice of life manga that is actually about 2 characters who decide to make a manga. So one of them is a writer, one of them is an artist. They decide to work together to create a manga. It goes really, really deep into the world of manga, to the point that the other day somebody asked me something about manga. I was like, well, it's because they have to do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And I was like, how do I know this? And it's because of this book. So if you're interested in the very fine inner workings of the manga creation and publishing world, I think you should try this out. It's very cool how in-depth it goes into the manga publishing world of Japan. I mean, I've said this before on my channel, I love when you read a manga and you leave the pages feeling like you've learned something. And I often, when I step away from this, I'm like, I never really thought about that. And I think that's really cool. Really good. And I also really, really like the 2 main characters. I think they're very endearing and fun to read about. So that's Bakuman. And then, of course, if you've been following me on TikTok, you know that this month I started watching One Piece. And I've also started reading One Piece. I have read, just to clarify, I have read some of One Piece in the past, but it was quite a long time ago, to the point where when I started watching the show, it all felt new. I was like, do I remember this? I don't remember this happening. So it's all very fresh. I've often talked about before how if I give myself 2 or 3 months away from a book, I'll have completely forgotten everything that happened in it. And that's how I'm feeling about One Piece right now. But I am watching the show. I'm almost 20 episodes into the show now. And so I decided I also wanted to read the manga. So I read the first one, and then I am going to be reading, I just started the second one. I'm going to be reading it alongside. Like, I'll watch an arc of the show, and then I'll read an arc of the manga and kind of keep it going that way. But I'm really already so in love with this series. I think Luffy as a main character is so fun. So much about this series is just so fun and inspiring, and it's often very silly, but it's also often, it kind of blindsides you with how deep it sometimes is and how poignant and thoughtful it is. And I think that's really cool that it's able to kind of like yo-yo back and forth between just absolutely goofball silly, but also just like really deep, interesting, complex characters. And I think that's awesome. I mean, there's a reason this book and this anime has been around for so long. It's because it's captivated people for so long. And I often see people make the complaint where they're like, well, if something needs 100 volumes of manga and 1,000 episodes plus of anime to tell a story, then it's probably not a very good story. But I disagree. I think if you can keep an audience entertained for that much time, you must be doing something right. Can you imagine? There are I can't think of very many series out there. I mean, the only thing I can think of that kind of comes close is like The Wandering Inn, if you've ever read that. To keep an audience entertained for that many pages, for that many episodes, and still keep them coming back wanting more, that is impressive. I think anyone who's ever written anything would wish to be so lucky as to come up with something that could last that long and still have people so in love with it. I think that's so cool and so special. So I'm really excited to go on this journey. I loved the first volume. I am excited to watch more, read more, all of that. And that's everything that I read in July. I graduated to knowing what month it is, so that's exciting. At the beginning of the video, I had no idea. But here we are, the end of July, the beginning of August. The flowers have written, no, that would be spring. Never mind. So yeah, July, or August, oh my God. August, I am also making my TBR pretty small, kind of to give myself some wiggle room. I am going to be away at Gen Con, which is a big board game convention, for about a week. So I want some wiggle room to be able to, if I read everything on this small TBR, then I can jump into some other books that I didn't get to in July, which will be great. And otherwise, I won't feel so pressured to feel like I have to read a ton of books, because I did kind of burn myself out in June, and I don't want to do that again because I love reading, and I never want reading to feel like a chore. Especially because it's a big part of my job, is what I do as a content creator. So I always want it to feel fun and fresh and exciting. So yeah, I'm excited for August. I'm excited to go to Gen Con. I'm excited to read more books. I will probably do a YouTube video about Gen Con, about the games that I buy there, and talk about that as well. So you can look forward to that. And in the meantime, let me know if you read any of these books. Did you read anything good in July? Anything that I should check out? Anything I should check out? Anything? So let me know about that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the books that I talked about today. Make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, happy reading.